Good morning, everyone. Thanks very much to Dr. Anil Kar for the invitation to participate in this panel on global investments and good water governance. I'm Fabiola Alvarado. I'm the Secretary General of the Global Water Leaders Group. Today, I'll focus on investments in urban water and wastewater services, particularly on how we can unlock investments into water utilities to meet SDG 6. My focus on this topic emerges from the work of the organization I represent. The Global Water Leaders Group is a nonprofit organization that brings together water utility leaders, high-level policymakers, and water services regulators to exchange ideas, best practices, and inspire each other to improve the delivery of water and sanitation services around the world. In this effort, we collaborate closely with Global Water Intelligence, the leading provider of market data for the water sector globally. Many of the figures I'll show today are produced by them. My presentation looks at the current situation of investments in SDG 6 to point to the need of delivering bankability and the importance of good water governance in the effort to close the funding gap for SDG 6. I'll show some examples of the Global Water Leaders Group's efforts to support improvement of water utilities performance and thus their bankability. First of all, how does the world finance water and wastewater services? Utilities rely on a mix of finance. Globally, operational expenditure is funded mainly by tariff income and also taxpayer subsidies, while capital expenditure is mostly funded by loans and grants. Only 1.5% of capital expenditure is funded by private capital. Zooming into capital expenditure, 50% of this funds water and wastewater networks, which reflects efforts to expand the networks, maintain them, and reduce non-revenue water, which is a great concern in the sector. Focusing on the developing world, we see a different picture. Tariffs represent a smaller part of the finance mix. We also see the following trends on the path towards achieving SDG 6. Government grants will be a much smaller percentage of the total funding of water and wastewater services due to budget constraints. Also, international development finance is switching from grants to loans in an effort to maximize their impact while reducing their funding in some cases. We see the percentage of ODA grants reducing and ODA loans increasing across all regions. These trends particularly affect Southern Asia, which is the region where utilities least rely on tariff collection and mostly rely on government grants to fund water and wastewater services, which account for 1% and 87% of current funding into the sector. The picture is more stark in the case of India, actually, which relies even less on tariff collection, less than 1%, and even more on government grants, 94% for funding its utilities. This means that across the developing world, and particularly in India, utilities will need to increase tariffs and urgently attract alternative sources of funding if they are to meet SDG 6 by 2030. Globally, there is a trend towards water sector reform where governments are pushing utilities to become more reliant on their internal resources to finance water infrastructure. India is no exception, and in the last years, it's been increasingly promoting utilities and local governments to increase tariff collection and attract private sector funding. To achieve SDG 6 while reducing dependence on grants, water utilities will need to increase their income to leverage other sources of finance. However, one of the main obstacles to this is bankability. The issue of bankability is that many utilities don't make good prospects for donors or lenders because they lack structural autonomy and their accounts are not separated from local governments' accounts. They lack political autonomy and are easily influenced by political cycles. They tend to have weak leadership, sometimes related to poor incentive structures, and have historic indebtedness. As we can see, these issues are a reflection of poor governance, both within the utility and in the broader system where utilities operate. So in order to achieve SDG 6, there must be reform at the utility and wider sector level to improve utilities' performance and make them bankable. To deliver bankability, we need to reverse the cycle of utility decline. Pictured here is a widely used graph originally produced by a World Bank study in the early 2000s. This vicious cycle starts with low tariffs and low collection. To reverse the cycle at the utility management level, the strategy is to take the opportunity of a crisis to build momentum for reform, starting with improving revenue collection, then moving on to fixing network leakage, both of which are quick wins to increase cash flow. This provides a foundation for financial sustainability. As momentum builds, the utility can then attract investment from donors and later on lenders. In the case of India, there's a lot of opportunity in network leakage reduction. India is the country with the highest percentage of non-revenue water, 50%, among the largest economies. And programs like the Smart Cities Mission and the Jal Jeevan Mission have introduced key opportunities to reduce non-revenue water in urban areas. The reforms required to enable bankability of utilities are related to the attributes of water governance at both the utility and also higher institutional levels. Reforms to increase the levels of accountability, transparency, efficiency, among others, are necessary to improve the performance of water and wastewater service delivery and make it more responsive to the needs of their communities. Well-performing utilities will not just be financially viable, but will also be able to translate investments into tangible improvements to services, making the investments have real impact on SDG 6. So what is the Global Water Leaders Group doing in this space? The group aims to help improve performance of water utilities around the world to contribute to SDG 6. We do that by working with both water utilities themselves and with other players around them that can facilitate their efforts. With water utilities, we contribute to building capacity among their leadership by connecting leaders from utilities that have led successful turnarounds or currently lead high-performing utilities with others that are willing to learn from them and implement the lessons learned. We do this by providing opportunities for peer-to-peer learning and mentorship at workshops, webinars, and other online and in-person events. For instance, we are supporting a program called the Cape Town Water Exchange, where leaders at the water department at the city of Cape Town learn best practices in their priority areas, including financial sustainability, from leaders from our leading utilities of the world network. We also engage with others, such as development cooperation agencies and investors, to figure out ways to mobilize funding to utilities for SDG 6. For instance, we've been collaborating with the German development agency, GIZ, and others in developing the concept for an urban water catalyst fund. The idea is to provide seed funding to support utility turnarounds as a first step to make them bankable. Then successful utilities would be eligible for greater funding, including private, to invest in SDG 6 projects locally. This concept is still under development. So in summary, finance for water utilities is moving away from grants to loans, which means that utilities need to become bankable, as no one wants to put money in a leaking bucket, and utilities ultimately need to offer returns to funders. Good water governance unlocks investments into SDG 6. It enables performance improvements, which leads to A, bankability, and B, a greater ability to translate investments into tangible and better results. Finally, where can we start with reforms? The virtuous cycle to a better performing utility starts with a utility leader, a political leader, and an opportunity to gather momentum to change course for the better. Capacity building at the utility leadership level is key to kickstart and maintain reforms. This is the space where the Global Water Leaders Group is working, and we would be happy to hear from you if you are working in this space as well. Thank you very much for listening and wish you a fruitful conference. Thank you.